The home advantage. How presence at home builds quiet empires. The C-suite is hemorrhaging talent, not to competitors, to living rooms. While boardrooms debate return to office mandates, a parallel economy is emerging, one without commutes, without performance reviews, without the $30,000 daycare bill that mathematically negates your salary. The women building it don't announce it on LinkedIn. They don't have lunch parties. They simply stop participating in a system designed to extract their labor while taxing their peace. And by the time the market notices, they've already built something the market can't acquire. By the end of this video, you'll understand why proximity to home isn't a career compromise, it's the most underpriced strategic asset in the modern economy, and you'll know exactly how to convert it into equity. Let's start with the diagnosis. The reason you feel perpetually tired isn't a personal failing. It's not poor time management or insufficient ambition. It's because you've been investing in a depreciating asset. A job, even a prestigious one, is a depreciating asset. You exchange hours for currency, but you never own the infrastructure. You build someone else's valuation. When you leave, your contribution is reassigned to your replacement within a billing cycle. The equity you generated transfers to shareholders you'll never meet. This isn't cynicism, it's accounting. Now consider what happens when you redirect that same intellectual capital toward a system you own, a business, a brand, a portfolio, a body of work that accumulates value independent of your physical presence in a specific building between specific hours. The gap between those two models, that's where generational wealth is built. And the women who see this first are the ones who've been told they're scaling back when they choose to work from home. The ones who've been patronized with flexibility rhetoric while watching their male colleagues get promoted for commitment. You're not scaling back, you're reallocating. The corporate model promised security in exchange for loyalty. That contract is void. Layoffs are announced via Slack. Pensions are folklore. The 40-year career arc your mother planned for is now a 4-year rotation interrupted by restructuring. Economic data suggests that the average professional will hold 12 to 15 jobs across their lifetime. Each transition comes with a reset. New health insurance, new 401k vesting schedules, new political landscapes to navigate. You start from reputational zero every 36 months. This is not stability. This is systemic volatility dressed in business casual. Meanwhile, the home, the place you were told to apologize for prioritizing, offers something the market cannot: continuity. You are not rebuilding trust every quarter. You are not code switching across cultures. You are not performing capacity in meetings designed to justify other people's management positions. You are simply building, quietly, incrementally, with the one advantage that compounds faster than any other: time proximity to your own life. Which brings us to the mechanism. The thing they don't teach in business school, because business school is designed to produce employees, not architects. The world calls it work-life balance. We call it the domestic sovereignty framework. Here's the difference. Balance implies equilibrium. It suggests that work and life are opposing forces requiring constant negotiation. You borrow from one account to pay the other. You feel guilty on both sides of the equation. The framing itself creates deficit thinking. Sovereignty operates differently. It means you own the system. You set the terms. You design the infrastructure. You don't balance competing priorities, you build a model where your priorities are structurally aligned. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. When you work from a traditional office, your day is architected by interruption. Meetings scheduled by people whose productivity depends on your attendance. Commutes that consume 10 to 15 hours weekly time, that is neither work nor rest, just lost. Office politics that require emotional labor to navigate, with no line item for that expenditure on your performance review. These are what we call systematic value leakage. Small inefficiencies that aggregated over months represent the difference between surviving and compounding. Now consider the home operator. Zero commute means you reclaim 12 hours weekly. That's 624 hours annually. At an hourly rate of $100, which is not ambitious for skilled labor, that's $62,000 in retained time value, not money saved on gas. Time that can be deployed toward revenue-generating activity, toward learning, toward strategy, toward rest, which is itself a form of capital. This is the first leverage point, geographic efficiency. The second leverage point is what behavioral economists call decision fatigue, mitigation. Every choice you make depletes cognitive resources. What to wear, where to eat, how to navigate a conversation with a colleague who chronically undermines you in meetings. These micro decisions accumulate into macro exhaustion. The home operator eliminates an entire category of decisions. Your wardrobe is optimized for function and comfort, not optics. Your meals are prepped in your own kitchen, not sourced from overpriced salads in plastic containers. Your emotional energy is not siphoned by performative collegiality. You are not suppressing yourself to fit into someone else's culture. You are not code switching. You are not managing perceptions. You are simply doing the work. This cognitive bandwidth, this recovered capacity, is where innovation happens. It's where pattern recognition sharpens. It's where you see the opportunity everyone else is too depleted to notice. And here's the uncomfortable truth: the corporate model doesn't want you to understand. Most offices are not designed for productivity. They are designed for supervision, for visibility, for the illusion of control. You don't need supervision. You need sovereignty. Which brings us to the third leverage point, and the one most women undervalue: relational capital. When you are physically present in your home, you are accessible to the people who constitute your primary economy: your children, your partner, your own nervous system. This isn't soft. This is strategic. Children who have access to a parent who is present but focused learn something textbooks don't teach. They learn that work is not something that happens in a separate realm, requiring a costume and a commute. They learn that valuable labor can happen in proximity to life. They learn that authority and care are not incompatible. You are modeling sovereignty. That is an inheritance. Partners in households where one person operates from home report higher relational satisfaction, not because someone is available to manage the household full-time, but because the operator has autonomy. Resentment decreases when the person contributing economically is also structurally empowered to manage their own time. And your nervous system, the biological infrastructure you depend on for judgment, intuition, creativity functions optimally when it is not in a chronic state of low-grade threat response. Open-plan offices, fluorescent lighting, lack of control over your acoustic environment, the constant possibility of surveillance. These are stressors, not dramatic ones, just persistent, depleting, accumulating. The home environment, when designed intentionally, is the opposite. It is a controlled variable. You set the temperature. You choose the lighting. You decide when to engage and when to retreat. This is not indulgence. This is operational efficiency. Now, let's talk about infrastructure. You wouldn't ask a surgeon to operate with dull tools. You wouldn't ask an architect to draft blueprints on a paper napkin. Yet the home operator is expected to build an empire using whatever leftover furniture fits in the corner of the bedroom. This is a capitalization error. If your home is your headquarters, it requires capital expenditure, not aspiration. Not when I make more money. Now, because the quality of your infrastructure directly impacts the quality of your output. Let me give you one example that changed the way I operate. Noise-canceling headphones. Not the kind you use on airplanes. The kind designed for acoustic isolation in environments where you cannot control the sound. I use the Sony WH-100XM5. The investment is approximately $400. Here's why that matters. When I put them on, my brain receives a signal. The operator is online. It is a boundary that requires no explanation, no negotiation, no guilt. My children see them and understand that I am working. My partner sees them and knows I am unavailable for logistical questions. I see them in the mirror, and my own nervous system shifts into a different mode. This is not about blocking out your family. This is about creating a toggle between modes, between availability and focus, between responsiveness and deep work. The cost per use, if you work from home 200 days a year for 3 years, less than 70 cents per session. The return on investment, immeasurable. Because it's not about the headphones. It's about signaling to yourself that your work has the same legitimacy as work that happens in a corner office. That you deserve tools that match the caliber of your thinking. The same logic applies to lighting, to seating, to the notebooks you use to architect your strategy. I use linen-bound journals, not spiral notebooks. Not because I'm precious about aesthetics though, design matters, but because the tactile experience of writing in something beautiful signals to my brain that the ideas inside are valuable. That this is not a scratch pad. This is a ledger. These are not expenses. These are capitalization decisions. Let's address the objection I know is forming. This sounds like privilege, and you're right, it is. But so is the college degree you earned. So is the network you built. So is the literacy that allows you to read economic theory and translate it into action. Privilege is not something to apologize for, it's something to deploy. The question is not whether you have advantages, the question is whether you're using them to build leverage or to secure approval. Because here's what I've observed. Women with access to education, capital, and choice often spend those resources trying to prove they don't need help. Trying to demonstrate they can do it all. Trying to succeed in a system that was never designed for their success. Just their participation. That is not strategy. That is assimilation. The home operator makes a different choice. She acknowledges that the system is not neutral. That it extracts more from her than it returns. And she withdraws her participation not out of defeat, but out of economic clarity. She redirects her labor toward a structure she controls. She uses her privilege not to climb someone else's ladder, but to build her own foundation. And she understands that doing this is not selfish. It's dynastic, because the empire you build from home is not just yours. It's the model your children inherit. It's the economic architecture your family relies on. It's the proof of concept that women in your network will reference when they decide to make the same move. You are not working from home. You are building the future from headquarters. So what does this actually look like over time? Let me show you the math. Year 1, you leave a corporate position earning $90,000. You feel insane. Everyone questions you. You question yourself. You launch a small consulting practice from your dining room table. You make $42,000. On paper, you've lost $48,000 in income, but you've gained 12 hours weekly. You've eliminated childcare costs of $18,000 annually. You've reduced dry cleaning, commuting, lunches out, and the psychological tax of workplace toxicity. Real cost savings, $26,000. Net loss, $22,000. That's the investment year. You're paying for sovereignty. Year 2, you refine your offer, you raise your rates. You add a digital product, you make $74,000. You're still below your corporate salary, but you're profitable. You're building a client base that is portable, not tied to a single employer. You own the relationship. Year 3, you hit 6 figures. You hire a part-time assistant. You launch a second revenue stream. You are no longer comparing yourself to your old salary because the models are incomparable. You are not an employee. You are equity. Year 5, you've built something that operates semi-independently. Your income exceeds what you would have made climbing the corporate ladder, but the quality of the income is different. It's diversified. It's resilient. It's yours. And the children who watched you build it. They've learned that authority doesn't come from a title, that wealth isn't a salary, that the most valuable thing you can own is your own time. That is dynasty thinking. I want to leave you with one final thought. The reason this model threatens the status quo is not because it's impractical, it's because it's replicable. If one woman leaves corporate to build from home, she's an anecdote. If 10,000 do, it's a trend. If 1,000,000 do, it's a market correction, and the system knows it. That's why there's so much pressure to return to the office. Why flexibility is framed as a concession, not a competitive advantage. Why women who choose home-based models are still asked casually repeatedly when they're going back to real work. Because if you succeed on your own terms, you prove the system was optional. And that is the most dangerous thing a woman can do. So here's what I want you to take from this. Your presence at home is not a fallback plan. It is not a placeholder until something better comes along. It is a strategic position with compounding advantages that the traditional model cannot replicate. You have zero commute, full control over your environment, proximity to the people and priorities that matter. The ability to build equity instead of trading hours, that is not a compromise, that is an empire. And the women who understand this now who stop apologizing, stop comparing, stop waiting for permission, they are the ones writing the next chapter of the economy. Not from a boardroom, from home. Disclaimer: this content is for educational and informational purposes only and does not replace consultation with a professional. Always consult a qualified professional for any questions related to finance or business. Tell us where you are building your empire from. See you in the next video.